Hello and welcome to the Parents Roundtable. Experts and everyday parents discuss common parenting issues. A telesummit produced by Joyful Parenting Coaching in support of United We Parent. United We Parent was co-founded by Hogan Hilling, author of the Dadly book series, and Elise Cohen-Ho, family and relationship coach at Ask Dr. Ho. The mission of United We Parent, a safe, trustworthy, and non-judgmental organization that embraces families of every dynamic, is to unify, strengthen, and inform the parenting community. Before we start today, I want to let you know that co-founders Hilling and Ho are coming out with 2 books this summer that really capture the mission of the United We Parent organization. The first, by Hogan Hilling and Austin Dowd, is Dadly Dads, Fathers of the 21st Century, and by Hogan and Elise, Amazing Moms of the 21st Century. Both these books really capture the mission that there are many, many ways to be an effective parent. United We Parent is also proud to announce its first ever United We Parent Conference, a day-long in-person event in Southern California designed to provide resources for all parents, regardless of gender, sexuality, marital status, how or when you became a parent, ethnicity, age, income, or anything else. We are focused on creating an interactive environment and to collaborate in harmony with other parents to create a happier and healthier parenting community. I am Elizabeth Stitt of Joyful Parenting Coaching, the host of the summit, and today I am very, very proud to introduce to you Kerri Isham, who is an expert she's a sexual health educator, and she's going to talk to us about the LGBTQ community. Kerri is a knowledgeable, experienced, passionate educator. She's a coach and a facilitator dedicated to excellence and committed to the sexual empowerment of people of all ages. Her primary goal is to make exploring sexual health fun and meaningful, and to alleviate the shame and embarrassment that is sometimes associated with this extremely important topic. An expert educator, Kerri completed the Sexual Health Educator Certification Program through Options for Sexual Health in Vancouver. Yes, she's Canadian. She was a school teacher for 14 years, including 10 years as a sexual health educator in the middle school level. And she later became the district health and fitness resource teacher, which created the opportunity for her to teach sexual health, or sex education is what we would call it in the States, to grades 4 and 5. Kerri then founded Power Up Workshops. That's powerupworkshops.ca for Canada, an organization that offers a variety of customized sexual health workshops for preschool to grade 12, parents, educational assistants, teachers, adults, and people with special needs. She is the author of Puberty, Coming to a Body Near You, a book that has gotten rave reviews from parents and kids alike. Kerri, I cannot tell you how delighted I am to have you here today. And
yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
I mentioned to you how really interested I am in this topic, because I feel like it's something which I don't know very much about. And, you know, as I began to think about it as a parent educator myself, I felt really bad, because it was like, I should know these things. And the fact that I don't, given that I'm always scanning the literature, means that it's really only beginning to come to the center of the conversation. And I really hope that what we offer today will maybe let more people know that this is a conversation that's going on.
Great.
Pretty ferociously in some communities, and then some of us still need to be woken up.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I can help.
Yeah. Truly, if you could just sort of start with some of the terms, and that would be great. Like just give us some definitions of things.
Okay, sounds good. So usually in my workshops, we start off with talking about what is gender. For most people, this is a bit of an elusive topic or definition, because we think, well, boy or girl. And really, gender is about your personal identity. It's about a range of expressions. It's how you relate to yourself, and it's more of a spectrum. So when I ask people, how do you know that you were a boy or a girl? Some of the common answers are things like, well, my parents told me I was a boy or a girl, or I wore my hair a certain way, or I had a penis or a vulva, and that dictated whether I was a boy or girl. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for all children, because sometimes a person is born with a penis and they actually identify as a girl. We call that transgender. Or someone's born with a vulva and they identify as a boy, and we call that transgender as well. So gender is really fluid, and it's more about how you feel about yourself, and it has really nothing to do with your private body parts.
Okay, that makes sense about yourself. Okay. So it's your personal identity, how you relate to yourself, how you feel inside, not necessarily how you look.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and so we also say, what is gender not? And gender is not about being male or female, and it's not about our body parts or private body parts. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation, and it's not even determined by our chromosomes, because there's so many different genetic differences when the sperm and egg meet.
Okay. Does it, so you said it's not male or female, but is it masculine, feminine?
Well, that's something else. That's sort of gender expression. And if you want me to talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, because okay, so I'm just saying that I'm trying to imagine. I mean, how do you divorce yourself from 50 years of being told that you're a girl?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'm trying to imagine what it would feel like inside. How I would know or identify that, oh, I don't feel like a girl.
Yeah. Well, and I think because of what's happening in the media and what's happening in the news and the shows that kids are seeing on TV, people I know in Canada, particularly I can speak from Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, kids are coming out of the woodwork. So sometimes we can talk about this and break it down into what we call binaries. And binaries are basically one end of the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum. And then we're also looking at what's in between those two opposites. So if we look at identity, people would identify as a woman or as a man. And in between the woman and the man, we would identify that person as non-binary. So they are not a woman, they're not a man, but they're somewhere in the spectrum in between.
Okay.
And then we can also look at gender expression, which is what you were talking about earlier, is some people show up in the world as feminine, and some people show up in the world as masculine. And then we have people on the spectrum in between that may more identify as androgynous. So this is a person that you may meet and you're not exactly sure, oh, well, is that person trying to show up feminine or masculine or something in between? I'm not even sure what their gender is. And we're seeing more and more people like this.
Okay. So there's really something about what we feel inside,
yeah,
what we're trying to show to the world, and then what are people maybe guessing as they look at us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think the important thing is not to guess, because for a lot of people, we may be guessing wrong. So they may be trying to present as male or female, or maybe androgynous, and we make a judgment based on, our context in the world and what we've seen in the past. Other binaries that we can look at are sort of biological sex. So some people are born female, some people are born male, and then about 1 in 1,000 people are born what we call intersex. So a word that we used to use that is no longer, acceptable would be hermaphrodite, something like that. And the kids still sort of ask me about that word because they've heard it before. But an intersex individual could have something like Klinefelter's, which is XXY chromosome, and the person would end up with smaller testicles, inability to reproduce, and that's, depending on the study, 1 in 500 or 1 in 650 people. A lot of people don't even know they have Klinefelters or any other, genetic difference until they try to reproduce. We've got things like Turner syndrome, which is XO, and it is for girls. And basically, the person never goes through puberty. They're not able to reproduce. They don't have their period. They don't get breast development. With the help of a doctor on estrogen, they could have breast development, but they're going to have shorter stature, and they're not going to have any of the secondary sexual characteristics.
And what's the percentage there?
That I don't actually know the percentage. In my time of working with 10,000 kids a year, I've only actually met one girl that actually came to me to say, yes, I have Turner syndrome. And it was pretty interesting. A couple of years ago, I got to see a presentation. Sometimes I think I've seen it all, and then something happens and it reminds me that there are so many possibilities. It was a presentation by youth, and they were exploring gender. And there was a boy and a girl on stage, and they both had Turner syndrome. So one of them identified, I'm a girl, and the other identified, I'm a boy. I have Turner syndrome. I have Turner syndrome. And one of the people on stage was a transgender male. So although he was born with a vulva, had Turner syndrome, how he showed up in the world was transgender. So it's always pleasantly surprising when I see something that I'm like, wow, that just blew my mind. I never imagined that. But there's so many differences out there.
Can we go back? This is
Sure.
I'm already overwhelmed with information. Can we go back a little bit more? Like you were talking about identity being non-binary, and
yeah,
and so I'm thinking of the scale at either end: strongly masculine, strongly feminine. And so does non-binary just suggest something more in the middle, or does it suggest something that's shifting around?
I would say more something that's shifting around. So on any point of the continuum, someone might be non-binary, but more on the feminine woman side, or someone might be non-binary more on the masculine male side, and somebody could fit directly in the middle. And even within that person, there's another option, well, two other options. So some people feel like, I feel like a woman, and the other person says, well, sometimes, the same person says, well, sometimes I feel like a man. And so that we call gender fluid. So on any given day, the pronouns of the person may change. They might be using she, her one day, and the next day, he, him. And then we have someone that may say, well, I don't feel like I'm a woman. I don't feel like I'm a man or a boy or a girl. I feel like I'm myself. And they would identify as agender or gender neutral. So we also have people like that popping up all over the place because they're clear about who they are, and who they are doesn't fit into these sort of small limiting boxes that we've sort of had for years and years and years.
Okay, so you brought up the pronoun question.
Yes.
So, and again, I'm trying to think of this from like, I'm an adult with kids. I'm volunteering in the school. I'm running the Boy Scout club or the Girl Scout club, which of course is already binary, but the Boys and Girls Club, let's say, the kid club. And I want to be appropriate. I want to see each individual for who he is, for who she is, for who they are. How do I say this?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do is just ask. So if somebody introduces themselves, some of these kids have very gender neutral names. Like if you got someone like Jaden or Chris or Alex, I would just suggest that you say, what pronouns do you choose for yourself? And it used to be like, what pronouns do you prefer? And we try to stay away from that now, because the preference means that the person that you're asking would have a choice as to what they use. I prefer you to use he or him gives you the option of using she or her. So the chosen pronouns, I would like you to use he and him, she and her. Some people use they and them. And there's a whole variety of different other ones that probably are going to take longer to catch on, like Z and Zer. There's per for person. There's all sorts of different, choices out there for young people.
Okay, so tell me one more time. What pronouns do you, the question is, what pronouns do you use?
Yes.
What do you use? What pronouns do you use?
Yeah.
And is the expectation that that is something which is consistent across time, or from morning to night, from the end of the beginning of the week?
Well, see, that this is the tricky part, because if you have a gender fluid person, I had clients one time, and the parents were getting super frustrated. The youth was getting really frustrated because the parents weren't able to read this teenager's mind about who are you today and how are you showing up, because they have different names and then different pronouns. They don't necessarily just keep the same name. So they might have a male name and the male pronouns, and the next day they may be using their female name with the female pronouns. So I actually suggested that they use a flip chart. So they came up with the pronouns. The youth came downstairs, flipped to the pronouns that they wanted the parents to use that day, because there's no way that someone would be able to tell what's happening with you internally about, what gender you were identifying with. So it can cause a lot of tension. I think for the gender fluid youth and children, it's probably the most complicated for them to be able to express who they are, because that can change during the day. It can change within the hour. It can change from day to day. So it can be very confusing, and they have to be really clear, which sometimes they get tired of doing that, even though there's no way to mind read.
Yeah. Right. And to me, the question that's popping up is like, oh, okay, then why is gender useful to us? I mean, in terms of like linguistically, and in terms of the world, why isn't it just something that I guess it is singular and they is plural? I mean, there's still, okay, I'm an English teacher, so I have to go into the grammatical implications of it.
Yeah. And I've heard that before. I mean, anybody that has an English background, I have a minor in English as well. And, the use of they, them is actually singular for people who are, choosing that as their pronoun. It doesn't mean more than one. And so for some people, that's a bit of a shift. But, when you meet someone who doesn't identify as male or female, or they want to use they, them pronouns, it actually isn't that difficult to switch over with practice. And you're going to bumble your way through sometimes, and the person's feelings may be hurt, and you just have to apologize and just say, my intentions are the best. Sometimes when I look at you, I see she or he, and I just get confused. So please bear with me while I do my best to be supportive of you. And I think that's all they want. The only problem is sometimes they get that at home, they get it at school, they get that with their peers, and it gets pretty overwhelming for them to always have to explain themselves. Like, this is who I am. How come everyone doesn't get it? I really get it. This is getting, agitating and sometimes irritating for them.
Okay, but let me just break it down to more basic. Let me just practice for a moment. So sure. I would say, Kerri, do you know Alex? They lives in Vancouver.
Yeah. So they live in Vancouver.
So I would still use the live. They live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Even though I'm referring to the one individual, and I have no idea, or I'm only making guesses at the individual.
Yes.
What parts they have. We're still going to take that. Okay, so what part they have, and can only make some guesses about how they're presenting in terms of how it looks to me.
Yeah, it's just the safest thing to do is ask, because I know there's been, all sorts of turmoil about, gender neutral bathrooms and things like that. And, the fact is, every single one of us have been in a bathroom with a agender or gender fluid or transgender individual. We would have absolutely no idea what kind of genitals they have, and nor should we. And if we always remember that the genitals that someone has nothing to do with their gender, it's easier to understand why if you had a vulva and you wanted to go into the boys' bathroom, that makes sense to me if you identify as male. You wouldn't want to go into the female washroom because most people are passing as the gender that they want to be. So it puts them in a really odd position, and going to the bathroom is a human right. And we know that people who are transgender often wait to go to the bathroom. They don't often use the bathrooms at school. They get urinary tract infections and bladder infections. And, this is simply not okay. Withholding, needing to go to the bathroom can cause some serious health issues. So we want them to be able to access that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What does Alex most need from me? What does Alex, whom I just introduced you to, what does Alex most need from me when I encounter them?
Yeah. I think just compassion and understanding, and just an awareness that everybody really is so diverse in their needs and their wants and how they show up in the world. And, just to remember that, every person, whether they identify as whatever gender, deserves respect and dignity. And, you don't have to accept how they show up in the world, but I think there has to be a level of respect, human being to human being, that that if you have some religious affiliation and your your belief system and your value system does not support, say, homosexuality, for example, we still need to respect that person. We don't have to accept their lifestyle, but we do have to be compassionate and empathetic. And I think that we expect that from everybody towards everyone. It's just sort of something that, is a basic need for us all.
The question that comes to mind is there any place outside the doctor's office where we need gender?
Yeah, see, this is interesting. Maybe one day it's not going to be such a focus. Maybe people will not have to announce their gender. They won't have to announce their sexual orientation. Even at the doctor's office, right? We need doctors to be, again, compassionate, empathetic. We need them to have training, to be sensitive. Some people who are trans male, they don't refer to their genitals as a vulva. They may refer to it as the front opening, the back opening. Someone with a penis may not refer to it as a penis. And so asking the person is how would you like me to talk about your genitals? Is genitals a word that works for you? Because that's sort of all encompassing. When we're filling out forms, when we're saying male or female, that's really talking about our sex. And when we're, really we should be filling out our gender as, male or female or other. And some people don't like the other category, but the list gets very long. When you're applying for a job, I don't think your genitals are important. So if we're asking about sex, we're actually saying, do you have a penis or do you have a vulva? Or do you have something in between, which is really nobody's business.
Which is nobody's business, right? Unless there's your doctor and there's a problem and you need to look at. Yeah. So that, I'm just thinking absurd things what don't we put on the job application form, right? We don't ask people's height generally, right? Maybe for, I don't know, specific factory jobs or lifting jobs or something. Actually, no, but do you identify as short? Do you identify as tall?
Yeah.
Short, tall, where, I'm short in one situation and I'm tall in another.
Right.
So you're right.
And we've been very lucky. So what we have for our attendance at our schools in the specific school district that where I live is that kids are able to have their chosen name on their records. It's not very difficult to change your birth certificate. It's just an application and a waiting process and a fee. Kids are supposed to be able, and youth are supposed to be able to have the teacher use their chosen pronouns, use the bathroom of their choice, play on the sports team of their choice. And so, I think other than the doctor, the only person that needs to have any information about your genitals would be the person that you're choosing to share your body with, and nobody else.
Yeah. I'm trying to, I mean, I hope teachers have been working for a long time on not saying, boys line up, girls line up, boys do this, boys do that. I hope that we have been finding alternatives for that for a really long time. Yeah, I'm thinking about how we do come to understand ourselves and the word. So now I'm thinking, if you're the parent of a small child, of an infant, of toddler, 3-year-old who is doing all of that classification, right? That's such a classic 3-4 thing. You have a penis, you're a boy. You're like me, I have a penis. Yeah. How do we as parents, is it time to give up that language? Is it how does it play into developing identity?
Well, with my preschool kids and my kindergarten grade 1, all I say to them is, I say most boys have a penis, but not all. Most girls have a vulva, but not all. And for the kids that, their gender matches the gender that they were given at birth, it kind of goes right over their head. They don't really think about it. But the kids who are listening to figure out, do I fit here? When they hear that, I really believe it's like, that's true, because I'm a girl and I have a penis. So what she said is true. Most girls have a vulva, but not all. And so even when we're naming genitals, I give them the option of, do you have a penis? Do you have a vulva? Or do you have genitals or genitalia? And that frees up the kids to not to say one or the other. And I think, for little people, we know around 5 years of age, they start understanding gender and gender roles and gender stereotypes and things like that. So I have worked with clients. My youngest client was 4 years old, adamant that they were a boy, have completely socially transitioned. The entire family knows this little person's in grade 1 right now. It's kind of like, oh, you're such a good girl. And the child's like, wait, I'm a good boy. Like, they're at clear. And some people will say, no, they can't possibly know who they are. And it's like, but our self-identity is something personal. Someone can't tell us that we're a boy or a girl, or either or both. That's an internal, deep spiritual knowing of, this is how I show up in the world.
I'm like, my mind is really being stretched. This is a really new way of thinking for me, and I expect for a lot of other parents. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I guess curiosity is always my fallback stance. Yeah. For when I'm dealing with kids, it's always my fallback stance. It's sort of, who are you?
Yeah.
What's going on for you? And then being quiet and listening.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I've heard things like how you cannot transition until you're 18, or, someone wouldn't know if they're male or female until they're an adult. And, sort of my go-to response is, if parents are really supportive of their child and who they are, that child's going to thrive. And if they're not supportive and there's shame involved, then that child is going to have suicidal ideation or maybe even suicide attempts. And so my response to a parent saying to their young person, you're not able to transition socially until you're 18, my question is, do you think your child is still going to be here when they're 18? Like, this is, people who are transgender 20 times more likely to contemplate suicide. So because they feel like they don't fit in, and particularly if they're safe haven, their home, they don't feel like they fit in their home, then how could they possibly feel safe venturing out into the world as who they are? So some students, they'll actually share with the school that they are transgender, that they may dress one way on the way to school, but when they get to school, they're changing to show up as who they are. And sometimes the parents have no idea. And we're not under a legal obligation to let the parents know that that child is transitioning at school, because we don't know if the environment is unsafe at home or not. So if we called home and said, oh, by the way, your child is transitioning, that might put that child in danger, because if they didn't go to their parents first, there's a reason they didn't go to their parents first.
Right.
Whatever that may be. Might be fear, might be, I don't think my parents will accept me. It might just be, oh, it's easier to transition at school. There's support people in place here. But I find that quite a bit in the high schools, that the high school students will transition with their peers and at school before they transition at home.
Yep, that makes sense to me. That makes sense. Okay, what have we not covered that's really important, because we are at 30 minutes?
Yeah.
So
I would say the last thing I just wanted to mention is sexual orientation. So sexual orientation has nothing to do with your gender. So some people are attracted to women, some people are attracted to men, some people are attracted to neither. So they would call themselves asexual, and that's about 1% to 2% of the population. Some people are attracted to both men and women, that's bisexual. And this may or may not be a new term for people. Pansexual is a person that's attracted to someone regardless of their gender, regardless of the genitalia that they have. So you could date a male, you could date a female, you could date someone who's transgender. You're more concerned with liking the person and being attracted to the person than who they are as gender or their private body parts.
okay, which sort of seems, it feels like where we have to head eventually. if everything becomes so fluid and
Yes.
so unidentified and unknown, it seems that you're going to just, I'm a person, you're a person.
Yes.
Attracted to you, am I not?
Yes.
And then get it,
Yeah.
you know, the
Because
label.
I believe that your sexual orientation is fluid. So it can change over time. You might have only dated men your whole life, but then in your 50s, you met a female that, you know, you were really attracted to on a spiritual level, physical level. And some people don't identify as anything. They just like, well, I just go with, you know, my intuition of who I like. So that's a whole other field that is super interesting, super complicated. And I always look at that with a very curious lens, because just when I think I'm getting it, there's someone new that doesn't fit in with, you know, exactly how I saw things. So it's gender and sexual orientation is such a fascinating topic of study. Like it's just,
wow, yes, yeah, like a really rich tapestry. You can't even talk about it in black and white. It's
absolutely
enough to just have so many textures and colors. Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel like we've like hardly gotten beyond the very tip of the iceberg here. But I know that's where I was. So I'm assuming that a lot of other parents are also going to be at a place where there's a lot of new language here and a lot to absorb. And I so appreciate your introducing it to us.
You're very welcome.